Okay, next chair calls Sandra Stotsky, professor, University of Arkansas, testifying for committee substitute on HB 2923. Professor, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you in favor of the bill. I will fit right in with some of the comments that have been made by Jim Sturgis. I believe you have a copy of my paper, so I will refer to that to some extent, so I'm not going to be reading everything that's in it. But I did want to highlight some of the aspects of my own experience from which I speak, because I have had a great deal of experience at all levels with K-12 standards, assessments, and curriculum.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you could state your name and...
I'm sorry, Sandra Stotsky at the University of Arkansas.
And your position on the bill.
I am Professor of Education Reform.
Here in support of the committee.
Here in support of the bill.
Thank you. Go ahead.
In one of my former lives, I was the Senior Associate Commissioner in the Massachusetts Department of Education, where I was in charge of our K-12 standards, the ones that we have been implicitly referring to that have helped to spur Massachusetts students to the top. They were content-oriented standards. There were a lot of other people. I'm not claiming they were the only factor, but the quality of the standards has been recognized by the empirical success of the standards on all national and international tests. I also co-authored Achieve's American Diploma Project Exit Standards for English. I also co-authored your 2008 English Language Arts Standards here in Texas. So I do know those extremely well since I helped to write them. I was also on the National Math Panel, appointed by then Secretary of Education Margaret Spelling. And finally, I served on Common Core's Validation Committee from 2009 to 2010. So I have had quite a range of experience.
And you're testifying for the committee substitute, correct?
I'm testifying for House Bill 2923.
That's
yes.
impressive. Very much so.
Because I will make points. These are the following points. I'm going to speak to the mediocre quality of Common Core's English Language Arts standards, especially in grades 6 to 12, and what its lack of international benchmarking means. I'm going to speak to the high quality of Texas's 2008 English Language Arts standards, but I won't just quote myself, because that would be kind of biased. I will talk about the non-transparent process that was used to develop Common Core standards, because I became very familiar with them being on the validation committee. And I will also talk about the non-transparent process now being used to develop a national curriculum and national tests based on Common Core standards by the two testing consortia funded by the USDE. And I can only say that based on what I have read about them. I've had a great deal of civic involvement at all levels all of my life. Local community groups, state level, national level. I understand civic process, civic procedures, and I was among the 5 members of the validation committee, Common Core's validation committee, that declined to sign off on the standards. And one of the criteria for not signing off was the fact that the development of the standards violated almost every civic procedure that I have been familiar with in my life. And I had been in the Massachusetts Department of Education in charge of the public process for the development of our standards, so I know what the public process is like from a Department of Education point of view. Now, I understand that both NGA and CCSSO, the two groups that were developing our Common Core standards, are private groups, NGAs or NGOs. So therefore, they're not bound by the same civic procedures that a government-appointed body would have to follow. I understand there's a distinction. But since what they were creating, and everybody knew this, were standards to serve as our national standards, there should have been an open process about a number of details, which I will go into. But I would like to just go through some of these points very quickly and then have you ask me any questions that you would care to. First of all, let me just give my own professional judgment about Common Core's college readiness standards for the English language arts. And I want to confine my remarks to English because I'm not a mathematician. So I will not speak to mathematics standards. You have already received, I believe, the written testimony from Professor Milgram, who was on the validation committee with me. He was the only mathematician on the committee. I was the only English language standards person on the committee. But I confine my remarks to what I have expertise in, not math, and that is not mathematics. So you'll have to get that from Professor Milgram. The standards, which I've analyzed in detail many times over, do not signify readiness for authentic college-level work. At best, and I say that very specifically, at best, they point to readiness for a high school diploma. But it all depends upon where the cut score is set, and we don't know that yet. But they do not prepare students for authentic college-level work, and they are not internationally benchmarked. Professor Milgram says the same things about the mathematics standards. We're talking about Common Core standards. Neither of them make us competitive with other countries that have high expectations for their high school students. Second point is about the quality of your own 2008 standards in English. They are, at this point, the best set of standards in the country. This may come as a shock to many people in Texas, but now that both the Massachusetts and California, and also I should say the Indiana standards, have gone with the wind because those states have adopted Common Core, the next best set of standards in English in the country are Texas's. And to back up my judgment, I will quote from the Fordham Institute's review that came out last July, and here is what Fordham said about Texas's English language arts standards, and it gave it an A-. Texas's ELA standards are more clearly written, better presented, and logically organized than the Common Core standards. This is not from me, this is from Fordham. Texas standards include expectations that more thoroughly address comprehension and analysis of literary and non-literary texts than Common Core, including helpful detailed standards that outline genre-specific content and rhetorical techniques. In addition, Texas has prioritized writing genres by grade level. So here we have someone saying, outside of my own judgment, that the Texas standards are better than Common Core's. So there's a different comparison to make. Let me now speak briefly to the non-transparency issue, because that bothered me considerably from the time that I was on the validation committee from September 09 to 2010. We were never given an explanation.
Professor, just
Chairman Branch has a question.
Jump in there. Fordham being Fordham University.
Fordham Institute, I'm sorry. When I referred to Fordham earlier, I said Fordham, Thomas C. Fordham Institute.
And where is that located?
In Washington, D.C.
And is it considered a high standard for evaluating these sorts of curricula?
It has had a large following among those who espoused conservative issues because it supports choice, charter schools, vouchers, and it has always used scholars or other academic experts to do the reviews of standards.
Thank you.
Over the years. And its grades are, I would like to add, taken quite seriously by most states because there are detailed critiques that go with them. It is the only organization, actually, that provides detailed critiques of standards. I happened to get that going in '97 because I was sort of the guinea pig for them, and I did all the English language arts standards in the country, which was the most painful set of readings I'd ever done because most of them are in terrible condition and they haven't improved very much. But Common Core.
How's it going in Arkansas? How's that?
I'm not speaking about Arkansas. They adopted Common Core, but they have different problems there. And I'm not going to go into those details, but they could have looked to the Texas standards and didn't.